I think it would be kind of cool if you did have a way to limit things. Like, say for example, I do have a friend who's an extra, and you know, if at that time when he's on there, he's like, oh, this is where I was in the episode, and then I could spot him in the background or something like that. That would be kind of cool if you could limit it to, or if I have some friends who are also animators where they could talk about
the moments of socializing that you miss and some of the social media that could be brought in, you know, that kind of, because that's the healthy thing about socializing is that we'll laugh about something at the same time. It's kind of immediacy of things that you don't get if, you know, it's very difficult through, you know, we've just had that experience now setting up things. There has to be a reason to draw people into something like that in a society that's so full of information.
I see it as a good thing for like a second watch through. Like it's kind of the what is it called, the director's cut, where they have the people talking, the commentary tracks, like that kind of, where you could like turn off the lights and kind of watch it the first way through. And I know a lot of people who watch the episodes, especially of like cliffhanger type shows, they'll watch it again just to see what they missed. And you know, having a conversation with your friends about it maybe the second time through, and you could say, oh, did you notice this part of this episode? That might be kind of a cool way to.
You are there not because of the show, but because of the feed, the tweet feed. So it's like having an extra interest on that show.
It's going to be a particular kind of public, I can imagine.
Exactly. But it's not easy to.
And it's a bit of an organized commentary. So
like I was saying before, if you could limit your feed to show your friends or people who are professionals that you follow and their comments on the show, that would be kind of interesting, because I like following industry professionals who talk about animation. They could say, you know, I use Twitter to keep in contact with people who I may not see all the time, like friends from comic conventions that have a specific interest group. Like I won't see them in everyday life, but I'm still friends with them, and we can, if I ever need help, I can just say, oh, what's the best plugin for WordPress that does this?
Maybe if you're going to have like many feeds throughout time, maybe there's a way that people can categorize them in terms of shutting down windows that are the early feeds and just looking at the final ones and not, you know, because I think what happens a lot with these kind of things, even blogs or other, is that it just starts adding and adding and adding. It's like a scroll, you know, it's a bit that scroll interaction mentality, which I think is really uninteresting because from an interaction point of view, it's just confusing for me. There's something that always stands out to me from a kind of graphic and interface point of view, which is that the feeds are all presented in the same font, type and color, and there's no use of color. And from a kind of a user, you know, perspective, that is not a very good way of interacting, because if you have many feeds, you end up really confused which one you wanted to follow, which one, you know, like who is who, if that person repeated again a feed. If there would be a kind of interesting graphic way to not represent this in a linear way, or to maybe use color or some kind of other icon or something that could allow me to know that that person is the same as that one, for example.
The good thing of it is that if you have a comment that is commented again, you could organize, you know, these roles. And you can, in a way, hide them, because if you have all of them there, it's easy for the user to get confused.
I'm not thinking only at, you know, from the perspective of the live feed that you see the information as it goes, but if someone wants to go back and follow the history, then you have to find a way to navigate that history without being overwhelmed with information.
I'm kind of thinking on a personal note, if I'm normally with my flatmate, we like to have one programme that we can watch together. And normally it's someone's missed the week before, so you're always trying to explain. And then wait, so you have to understand this bit, because at that point in the last programme this happened. So actually, if you could, like you say, with that kind of visual cloud, find a way of, say, at 40 minutes, whatever, in the last programme was when, so you can have that moment.
If you could have a way to sync up with other people so that you can watch it at the same time, because my mom is the same way. She likes to watch shows with me. Limit your feed to show your friends or people who are professionals that you follow and their comments on the show. That would be kind of interesting, because I like following industry professionals who talk about animation. They could say, you know, if their commentary while watching it would be about, you know, how well thought out the lighting was in this scene, that was, you know, or did you notice this part of this thing? That could be kind of really interesting.
Organizing, I think, the content be a nice idea for this application because the content is very important. So you're there because of, to see what you missed or any other ideas or any other hints. So maybe like you always said, discussions, like small discussions, like one comment that followed a huge discussion could be somehow highlighted.
I think maybe if you could have that kind of cloud system that people use a lot now, you know, that kind of cloud interface where you select one thing and then you see the connections coming up with other things. I'm just imagining something more complex. Because if you're really into the story, you want to know how that comment would connect to a comment from someone else about a certain scene. You know, just think if you're really obsessed about that program or
and how the story goes, because you want to see things that you haven't seen or you haven't noticed, or new potentials, new roles and all that. So extra connections always is interesting.
More than that kind of linear. I think that linear is really and demanding for people to kind of follow through that. And what do you really get out of that besides noise?
Because people who
feed of words, it could be, you know, you're connected by sound at least, so you're laughing at the same time, or video.
Maybe like close personal friends or family or something like that. Because I think that's something that a lot of people maybe share, like they have one show that they both like to watch, and that's always a fun thing. But then if you have the long distance, if there's a way to synchronize that up.
Creating personal profiles, because I think that if I have a particular interest and I go to this application for a particular show and I know that someone that I admire or I work with or professionally speaking also uses this application, I would like to be connected to him and see his comments, you know.
5 minutes after the show, they have like actors who were on, or the director who directed that episode. It's called Talking Dead, and then they just talk about like little bits of the show and who the zombie was or whatever. Yeah, so I think that might be also a good way to promote shows. Like people who are interested in this kind of thing, like people who go to conventions or whatever, they would probably be interested in having like maybe the director or the actors or the animators or whatever you have like a top stage area where they can say, we decided this costume for this character because blah blah blah, and then at the same time all the people are watching at the same time, and maybe they can start saying, oh, why did you choose to bring that one, and people could maybe respond.
More academic things maybe, like a lot of universities now do online learning. Could imagine something potentially interesting if most of those online learning platforms are quite static. So maybe there's a lot to do there in terms of making a more dynamic community around what the subject that you're learning. One of the challenges of teaching design online is that many of the things are very kind of tacit. You know, how do you teach skills that are studio skills online? You know, some things are very hard to explain by text. So maybe there's like interesting ways of bringing other, sound or other aspects into that, and looking at other spheres of practice and education.